So, a few months ago, my wife treated me to a train trip to Riverside, which honestly is a town that has a lot going for it. Really cool architecture, some weird history, genuinely great art museums, and some fun places to eat, all in a pretty walkable downtown area near the train station. So, come along and explore Riverside with us. Right off the bat, I should state the obvious caveat here, which is that Metrolink schedules for getting to Riverside are not very convenient. The schedule is designed for commuters coming into LA in the morning and going back out in the afternoon, which makes it almost impossible to do this as a day trip. You have to do it as an overnight trip to make it worth your while. I have a guide linked in the description below, which goes over the schedule in more detail. So pay close attention to that and plan carefully if you want to make this trip yourself. We took the 1035 Riverside Line train leaving from Union Station, which carried us through some east side suburbs and through the city of Industry. Something kind of goofy happened in Industry. I don't know if there was a freight train in the way, but our train wasn't able to get on the track next to the platform at Industry Station. So we actually passed the station, came to a stop later on. And then we reversed back onto the track serving the platform. Backing up, backing up, backing up, backing up. This whole process made us about 30 minutes late out of Industry, although the train was able to make up some of that by the time we got to Riverside. I don't know if this is a common occurrence here, but it was very funny. This would be a funny thing to include in the video. Anyway, once all that was done, we carried on without any further problems. Look at that, look at that.
Now arriving Pomona North, please use Pomona Downtown, excuse me, and
where nothing can possibly go wrong. Possibly go wrong.
After passing through Ontario, the landscape shifted pretty dramatically as we entered the Urupa Valley, where the warehouses gave way to open fields and green hills. Soon, we got our first glimpse of Riverside in the distance as we crossed over the Santa Ana River and rolled on into the station at downtown Riverside. Walking out of the station, we headed north for a few blocks before turning left onto Mission Inn Avenue and crossing under the freeway into downtown. The next few blocks of the street are basically Riverside's Museum Row, home to the town's History Museum, the Riverside Art Museum, and the brand new Cheech Marin Chicano Art Museum. The Cheech is actually part of the Riverside Art Museum, so a ticket for one gets you into both. The Riverside Art Museum was focused on artists from the Inland Empire. All the exhibits here seem to be temporary. When we visited, they had an exhibit on the local punk scene, which was very fun, some work on local environmental issues, and some pieces from the museum's collection. And it's housed in a lovely old building with this covered courtyard in the middle. Plus, the gift shop was very nice.
He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die! A llama?
The Cheech, on the other hand, focuses on Cheech Marin's personal collection of Chicano art. Something that surprised us was for a museum located in Riverside, there was such an LA emphasis in the art. There were so many depictions of East LA, Boyle Heights, Echo Park, like such specific LA locales. And all of it was fantastic. Really top notch stuff here. The highlight work was this really trippy glass sculpture in the lobby that has this kaleidoscope effect. It really deserves your full attention. Moving on, right across the street from the Cheech is Riverside's most famous attraction, the Mission Inn. This is actually where we stayed in Riverside, and I'll talk about the hotel experience in a bit. But the first thing we did was take a guided history tour of the inn. They're a little pricey at $45 per person, but believe me when I say it is well worth the price. Our guide was very witty and charismatic, a little cheesy at times, but extremely friendly and knowledgeable. We got to explore so many areas of the hotel that are off limits to the public and learned so much wild history about the hotel. We also got a complimentary glass of champagne at the end. Now, strictly speaking, you're not allowed to take videos during the tour, so I can't really show you the best stuff here. But here's a couple of shots I snuck in. So we're here on Ghost Adventures. Real ghost sightings. Yep, you get to explore a bunch of secret tunnels, and I am not going to elaborate. The architecture of the hotel is insane, and when you take the tour, you learn why. The hotel has had so many additions and wings added over the years, each in a slightly different style, giving it the feel of a building that's much older than it actually is. Straight up, this is probably the most European looking building I have ever seen in the United States. It has flying buttresses, for Christ's sake. More buildings should have flying buttresses. Genuinely looks like you're in Europe right now. There's also a lot of hidden corners of the building that just make it fun to explore. You get to see a lot of this if you take the tour, but there's some stuff you can find that isn't even covered in the tour. And even if you're not staying at the hotel, it's pretty open for exploration since there's a few restaurants on the ground floor open to non guests. Speaking of which, one of the places in the hotel is a cocktail bar called the Presidential Lounge. The Mission Inn's main claim to presidential fame is it's where Richard Nixon got married. But a couple of sitting presidents have stayed here, like Teddy Roosevelt, and a bunch of presidents to be, like JFK. So all the drinks are themed after presidents who have stayed at the hotel. Now, was the JFK daiquiri really worth $22? Probably not, but I want to splurge, and it's a nifty space if you're a history buff. Now, as for the room itself. Oh my god. We stayed in one of the Mission King rooms on the top floor, specifically in the section called Author's Row. The views from up here were awesome. The room had these crazy high ceilings, and there was a funny kind of medieval motif in the design. There are cheaper rooms than this, but this was still on the lower end of what the Mission Inn offers. The cheapest rooms go for about $200 a night and up, and ours goes for about $250 and up, although that's really going to depend on what time of the year and day of the week you stay. I'd say as hotel accommodations go, our room was a little dated and the AC didn't really work, although it wasn't that hot, so it wasn't a big deal. But the funky architecture and the great views more than made up for it. In the evening, we had dinner at the most train themed restaurant in town, the Old Spaghetti Factory. Okay, I'm perfectly aware that this is a chain, but this location does preserve an important piece of local railroad history. The building used to be a fruit packing house dating back to the 1910s, and inside you'll find lots of decor celebrating the local citrus packing industry and the railroads that served it. It's on Mission Avenue, just a block from the train tracks, and you can hear the rumble of passing freight trains even inside the restaurant. The food is, well, it's good. It's a pretty solid pasta restaurant with generous portions. After dinner, we returned to the Mission Inn and enjoyed the view from the roof before retiring to our room for the night.
The next day.
After checking out, we explored Main Street, which is a pedestrian mall from the Mission Inn down to City Hall. We grabbed breakfast from a place across from the hotel, then got a coffee from a cool spot up the block that seemed pretty popular. After that, we popped our heads into a little bookstore and then checked out a little free museum run by the Mission Inn Foundation, which has a handful of artifacts from the history of the hotel, including a couple of things that were alluded to on yesterday's tour. Although, I'd say the gift shop is better than the museum itself. Heading down the mall towards City Hall, you'll pass UCR Arts, the art museum of UC Riverside. Practically speaking, it's really two museums covered under the same admission. One side of the museum is devoted to contemporary art exhibits, while upstairs on the other side is the California Museum of Photography, which had some really marvelous exhibits. There was a camera obscura, there was an exhibit with old 3D photographs, and there was even a temporary exhibit about Ansel Adams. So, fairly prestigious stuff. Returning to Mission Inn Avenue and heading a few blocks west, you'll pass the city's main library, which is a pretty impressive modern structure that's mostly elevated off the ground. Take the elevator up, and you'll get a cool view over this side of town. And inside are plenty of quiet places to sit while you enjoy the view of the street below. Right across the street from the library is the Inland Southern California Civil Rights Institute, which has a gallery with rotating exhibits on the civil rights struggles of the Inland Empire. And lastly, our final stop before heading home was for lunch, and it was right next door to the library. It's Tio's Tacos, and it's just as much a lunch spot as it is an art museum. The outdoor seating areas are filled with incredible folk art created by Martin Sanchez, the restaurant's founder. There's a chapel he built for his wife, there's a tunnel of monarch butterflies, elaborate tile work in all the walkways, and way more little details than you could possibly take in one visit. The food itself is great. This is old school Mexican food, so opinions can be mixed. In fact, the person who recommended it to us said you come more for the atmosphere than the food. That said, I got the hard shelled tacos and I absolutely loved them. The beef was rich and flavorful, and they had such a satisfying crunch. Let's hear that again. All in all, Riverside had a lot to offer us, and this is hardly a comprehensive guide. There were plenty of shops and places to eat that we didn't even get a chance to try. More than enough to warrant an overnight trip. So check it out for yourself, and thanks for watching.